Thank you, Chris. Good morning. I just have a few brief comments. First of all, I think it's great that we saw some progress from the federal government. I want to thank them for their support and efforts. That's another step forward. Actually, the other thing I'd note in particular is great to see the Natural Resources Trust Fund Board actually make a major recommendation to help with riverfront restoration. So I think that'll be a great project going on. Look forward to that going through the process. Beyond that, one thing I thought I would do is we're at the end of the year, our last meeting of the year, and I just want to thank everyone. This has been a long year for many of us, but a year that I think we've seen tremendous improvement over a situation that we wish never would have happened to begin with. But I want to thank everyone for their efforts for being part of this organization, this interagency council to talk about issues. And it's been great to see people step forward, everyone from every level of government, but so many nonprofits, so many volunteers, so many people from different organizations wanting to help one another. And I appreciate that. We've got wonderful outside experts that have come to the table, and we've got Mona and Mark down there, and we appreciate all your efforts for being part of this to help make sure we get on the appropriate track and to do it right. And so it's the holiday season, so I think it's important to always say thanks and be thankful for the things we've accomplished and recognize there's more work to be done. So thank you for your service, and I look forward to continuing to serve with you in the future.
Thank you, Governor. Mayor Weaver, any opening comments?
Sure, and the governor said a lot of them, but I just want to say, excuse me, that this has really been a great week for the city of Flint when you look at everything that's gone on. We got the money, and we're really excited about that because it affords us to do some of the things that we've talked about wanting to do and needing to do, and that's get those pipes replaced. So we're very, very grateful and excited about that. And I really, I want to take an opportunity to thank the governor because I remember when we were working toward this, I called you and I asked him, I said, can you call, some of your delegation? Can you please do that for us? And you said, I sure will. And so he made those calls for us. And so I really wanted to just take an opportunity to thank you for doing that. I even guess I'll go so far as to thank Rich Baird. Rich and I know it, but Rich and I have been working a lot on some things, and sometimes he pops me in my head and I pop him back, and then we say, okay, now what are we going to do? And we go forward and we continue to work together and make things happen. So it's been a great time, and we've been able to get some things done. So I need to thank you as well, Rich. I talked about there being some other good things that have happened in the city of Flint just this week because we had a press conference yesterday with the chamber, and we got some projects done. So you'll see some changes with the website if you're trying to get information about water issues, if you're trying to get information about the pipe replacement. We hope this is going to make it more user-friendly for people. We looked at upgrading the cameras for the police department, the LED lighting that's going to be happening. So we had that go on yesterday as well. And then we got some money from Charles Stewart Mott Foundation for capacity building. So things are happening and going in the direction that we wanted it to go. It has been an interesting year. It's been a long year. And even today, when I leave a little bit early, it's because we're going to be talking about a job fair that we're having at Burston. So some good things have happened. And I too wanted to just thank everybody because this has been time consuming, and for people to put this kind of time and effort and energy into making things better for the city of Flint has been wonderful. And like you said, the work isn't over. It's not over, and we have more to do. But at this point, I just wanted to wish everybody a happy holiday season, and then we'll roll up our sleeves and start back in January. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Mayor Weaver. Harvey, did you have any comments before we turn it over?
No, I don't. Thanks.
All right. So if we could move on to the Genesee County update. Mr. Valichek?
Well, I concur with the mayor and the governor. This has really been an excellent example of a collaborative process from the different local, state, and federal agencies trying to deal with this challenge. We're especially happy at the Health Department. We got some additional Healthy Start funding to hire some social workers that will be working with the high-risk pregnant women in the community on some of the issues around healthy birth outcomes. The Healthy Start Project works with pregnant women and kids up to 2 years of age, so we're hoping to have an impact there. We also continue to do outreach in the community. We're doing community clinics for vaccinations, where we're also taking the information about the expanded healthcare coverage out. And I think there's a huge effort in the community to make people aware of the coverage opportunities to assure that everyone takes advantage of this additional benefit. And again, happy holidays to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? With that, we'll move on to the water quality update. Mr. Christian?
Thank you. I have some real good news here. Several things are progressing very, very well. We've got a number of initiatives that are going on. We received in the latest round of the Sentinel data, and it looks outstanding. Currently, in this last round of Sentinel testing, slightly over 96% of the Tier 1 sites were at or below the 15 part per billion action level, and that marks the 6th Sentinel round in a row where the Tier 1 sites have been at or below 15 parts per billion, and that's 4 rounds in this current monitoring period. We will not be doing a round in December, mainly because of the holidays, so that pretty much concludes the testing for this monitoring period. And so since each round individually met the criteria, when we do the aggregate calculation, obviously that's going to come out below 15 parts per billion as well. We'll have that final calculation sometime in early January, and we'll make that available as soon as we finalized it. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is the progress in the schools. We've had tremendous success in the schools with our partners at LARA. We've replaced, if I remember correctly, over 1,400 different fixtures in different facilities, including the Flint Community Schools, charters, parochials, daycare centers, elder care facilities, basically anywhere where there was a population at risk. We just concluded our post-filter testing, because not only have we replaced the fixtures, but we've also installed filters as well. And we just concluded the sampling for those, and we're in the process of getting those samples tested, and we'll be putting reports together. But the preliminary results on that are very positive. And then finally, I'd like to give a very brief update on the CORE initiative. That's moving along very well. We're trying to ramp it up so that we have a total of 160 field workers and 16 coordinators. Currently, we have 28 field staff who are just doing a tremendous job, and we brought on board 6 coordinators this week, and they're in the process of getting trained, and they're just about there. And we already have 7 more field staff that are on deck next week, and as we go on, we'll be ramping this up in an expedited fashion so that we can get to the 160 as quickly as we possibly can. So are there any questions?
Of the, you said 96% of samples were less than 15 parts per billion for the Tier 1. How many were less than, what was the percentage for less than 10 parts per billion?
Well, let me put it this way. The 90th percentile was 8 parts per billion, so that means at least 90% of those were 8 parts or lower. I don't know what it was for 10 parts, but that round met the suggested amendment to bring it down to 10, that latest round.
Any other questions for George?
Yeah, George, if you could, this is Harvey, could you explain what a round is? Because I'm not sure the public understands what a round is.
Sure. So Under the regular lead and copper rule, a supply is required over a 6-month period to collect a number of samples for compliance purposes with the lead and copper rule, but they can do it at any time during the monitoring period, which would be a 6-month period. In this particular case, with the Sentinel program, a city the size of Flint would be required to have a minimum of 60 samples. Each Sentinel round is being conducted on a generally a monthly basis, where we're going back to the same places month after month so that we can do some trend analysis to see what the improvement in the system is. And each round individually meets the requirements for the 6-month monitoring period. But for this monitoring period, we've actually done 4 rounds. So the city is well above what the requirements are.
And George, when you say well above the requirement, sometimes that can be confusing.
Yeah,
It's a good
well above in a positive manner, meaning that more than 90% of the samples are at or below 15 parts per billion.
Thank you, George. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to add some additional information on the core teams. George invited me to address some 5 folks last night, the coordinators and the field staff. And I just want you to know these are mainly Flint residents. We've ramped up from the start of the core program, which stands for Community Outreach Residential Education. We started with 4, we ramped up to 28. We're well on our way to 160. We had a jobs fair this week, and we now have 111 mainly Flint residents in the pipeline to help get us there. They showed up and have been qualified. These folks are doing filter inspection, they're answering questions, and they're also doing needs assessments. And CORE is really a coalition of folks. I want to give recognition to Jamie Lee Venable and the Flint Cares folks under United Way, because they're partnering up with us. The mayor is really the leader of this effort, and as a result, we've gotten a lot of good publicity, and I can tell you the caliber of the people that I met last night, Mayor, I'm very impressed. These are the kinds of people that we want talking to residents, and I can't wait until you get to meet them too, because the mayor's agreed to be a part of the training and orientation for these folks. And then lastly, I just wanted to let you know we solved the transportation program with the Mass Transit Authority. We have vans and drivers for these folks, so we're getting them around much more efficiently, and they don't have to have their own transportation. And of course, you know, they can get in and out of a heated vehicle, so that means a lot as well in the wintertime. They've made 7,000 resident connections so far, many thousands more door knocks, but 7,000 actual connections where they determine that there's a filter in place, it's working properly, and just as a footnote, we currently have more than 1,300 residents, separate residents, who are receiving bottled water delivery currently because they requested it. We've made over 90,000 unique deliveries to date, and any resident that calls the 211 and requests that bottled water be delivered, I've audited this, and we're getting much less than a 24-hour turnaround. Usually it's same day, but it's never more than 24 hours from the call until they get the water they requested. So I do want to thank all of our partners and the mayor, because we are driving a very difficult process, but one that is very effective, and thanks to George and his people, because folks are being trained properly, and we're not rushing folks out until they're ready to go, and they're being trained not just by MDEQ, but by our community partners as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baird. Dr. Sullivan?
George, Dr. Reynolds is watching remotely, and he asked if I would just ask you to give an update on the information for people who, in advance of any water main breaks, as far as how they should be prepared for that?
Thank you. Yes, as you know, we took that original document and we shared it with a number of our partners for input. We're in the process of incorporating all of those comments and getting that compiled. And then we'll be doing a second round where we're going to pass it around so that people can have final input. And then we're going to try and get that out into the field as quickly as we can, but we just wanted to make sure that we tried to have as much input as we could on that.
And will you use the core team to distribute that information? Is that your method?
Yeah, that'll be part of the delivery system because there'll be certain documents that the core teams will be providing to residents, and it's our intent that document be one of them.
Any other questions? With that, we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, Flint Dashboard Update. Colonel Hippica?
Good morning, sir. Good morning, Governor and Mayor. So great news. Again, we continue to share a bunch of good news stories this morning. I'm pleased to announce that that the Flint Action Tracker website, which is the collaborative partnership between the city and the state, is now live. The URL for that is www.flintactiontracker.com. And that website, just to give you a little background on that, that's the performance. It's a performance dashboard that is designed to really track and provide an assessment of the key performance indicators that the city, the state, and the community chose in a nice collaborative fashion. And those areas involve water, health, education, economic and jobs, government, quality of life, and public safety. Many of the sites outcomes today are really focused on what we've done and where I would say our overall progress is to date. As we continue to grow and as we continue to identify more areas that we might want to really target, then we can make those changes on the website as the group sees fit. But certainly pleased to roll that out today. And it's a real strong testament to our really our friends from the community, as well as from the city and the state and the county. So again, that is www.flintactiontracker.com. On the other items, again, I track over 300 of those every week. On the Governor's 75-point plan, we have 49 out of 75 of those completed to date. So we're 65% complete with the 75-point plan. We continue to make progress on the Flint Water Advisory Task Force report recommendations, and those are obviously kind of parceled out. We have those. Some of those are assigned to the state and the state agencies. There's a few to the city, the county, et cetera. So, and I know that the city is working towards theirs as well. So, subject to anyone's questions, I can certainly try to answer any more of those if you like. But that's kind of the broad stroke items at this time.
Thanks, Colonel. Any questions for Colonel Hippica? Yes, sir.
Scott, you if it's all right, I'd just like to also mention under the communications and outreach effort that we're in the process of a letter signed by Mayor Weaver talking about all of this stuff along with collateral materials covering those various areas that you mentioned. It's going out to all residents in the various different languages, and that letter is being mailed as we speak, Mayor.
I was going to tell you it has been signed, so it should be going out. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions for Colonel Hippica? All right, moving on to the Emergency Operations Center update. We continue to work in conjunction with the local Emergency Operations Center within Genesee County, as well as the State Emergency Operations Center is still activated with some personnel there. And as reported in the past, there continues to be 9 community water resource sites open, 1 in each ward, to distribute water supplies throughout Flint. And based on, obviously, winter's the cold that's actually already here, we have placed what are called mini mobiles in each one of those locations. And electricity is hooked up in all of them. I think by today we should get the final okay. I think we had 3 or 4 of them that we were still waiting on a permit before we could actually turn the heat on in these, and this will allow our workers out there to have a place to go to warm up, in addition to all the clothing and gear that we provided to them, just to make sure that they're taken care of out there. In addition to the 9 water resource sites, we're also providing bottled water to the Food Bank of Eastern Michigan, and in turn, they are distributing more water to more than 30 community and faith-based partners throughout the Flint area. Since we began the distribution operations in January through the water response teams, the water resource sites, the state of Michigan has distributed more than 3.7 million cases of water, more than 145,570 water filters, and just over 316,652 replacement cartridges, and 1,488 water pitchers, and more than 56,743 at-home water testing kits to Flint residents. I say more than because by the time I get this information, it's already moving forward. As far as access and functional needs, and I know Mr. Baird touched on that earlier, in partnership with United Way 211, we've been working closely to ensure that Flint's most vulnerable residents receive water supplies that they depend on every day. And we realize that not everyone can make it into our water resource sites or to one of the community and faith-based partners distributing water through the Food Bank of Eastern Michigan. So we continue to encourage those that need to have these commodities delivered to call 211. I think, Mr. Baird, you had said some of the numbers. I don't know if this was one of them. Since January, we've made more than 69,400 visits to those who have dialed 211 or are on our access or functional needs list. And these include some unique visits that somebody calls and we have to make a one-time delivery to. To date, through 211, immediate delivery and access or functional need list door-to-door deliveries, we've provided more than 141,000 cases of bottled water. And I won't go through all of the numbers, just know that we continue to have the same process we've had in place. Nothing has slowed down. If anything, we've had a very steady pace. I have seen over the last few weeks bottled water drop, which is a good thing. That says people are utilizing or relying more on the filters throughout the city. But we continue to track that. The warehouse that we have in place continues to operate. There's 5 primary missions operating within our warehouse. One is to maintain community water resource site operations, which I just discussed, delivery to individuals on the access and functional needs list, deliver to United Way 211 unique requests, deliver water resources to schools. I have seen some information on schools that hasn't quite been accurate. We continue and have been delivering bottled water to schools since I don't know how far back, early on in this. A coalition of companies like Walmart, Pepsi, Coke, and Nestle are providing product and assistance to the schools in the affected area. We house that water in the warehouse, and we deliver that water from the warehouse into the schools. So there has been some information that has been out there that hasn't been quite accurate on that. And then lastly, assist the Food Bank of Eastern Michigan. As I mentioned, more than 30 faith and community-based partners receive water resources through the state of Michigan, through the Food Bank of Eastern Michigan. So with that, pending any questions, that is my update on the Emergency Operations Center and some of the operations out there. Yes?
Yes, my question, and I can't remember if you said anything, what is the holiday schedule for the water distribution sites?
That's a great question, and I should have brought that with me. I know they have it. I apologize, but I imagine my staff is watching right now, so if they could text me that information just to make sure I have it correctly, that would be beneficial.
And I know we probably will get a news release on it soon, too.
We definitely will. Tiffany, can you come up to a microphone, please, Tiffany? Sorry to put you on the spot, but.
At the table, but the pods will be open on New Year's or Christmas Eve day and New Year's Eve day, but they will be closed on Christmas Day and New Year's Day, if that makes sense. But we're working on a press release that'll go out Monday, and there will be flyers shared at the pods as well to share that information.
Can you say that one more time?
So Christmas Eve, the pods will be open. New Year's Eve, the pods will be open, but they will be closed on Christmas Day and New Year's Day. And there is a press release going out next week that will share that information, and there will be flyers shared as well.
Thanks.
Yes, normal hours, correct.
Thank you, Tiffany. Any other questions? Okay. With that, Harvey?
Yeah, so we have three subcommittee reports. Two of these subcommittees are new as a result of the meeting we had last month. The infrastructure is an existing subcommittee, but the water rate and also the rental property water bill subcommittee are two new subcommittees. So, Mr. Feiner, if you can do your update on the infrastructure.
Thank you. Yes, so the infrastructure actually, which is now combined with water quality and KWA subcommittee met this week. And a couple of things we wanted to update this group on. We talked a lot about the water quality things, which George already shared, so we're not going to reiterate those. But I want to share with this group some of the things we are doing that to implement our subcommittee's responses to the FWICC relative to the FWATF recommendations. That's easy for me to say. But relative to training, hands-on experience, and culture change. We just completed the first segment in conjunction with the city, and I credit Jolisa McDay for helping us with this, of the hands-on training at the water treatment plant, where we brought in a national expert, Nick Pizzai is his name, to train not only Flint staff, but also DEQ staff. So we had about 15 DEQ staff on site doing this side-by-side hands-on training. You may recall the recommendation was that we needed hands-on real-world experience. And they actually crawled down into filters and did filter cores. I mean, it was unlike any other training that you would typically get in the industry. It was phenomenal. My staff were really impressed. Flint staff, who I talked with, were really impressed. And so it's more than about the academic aspect. It's about the culture, the exchange, the side-by-side learning that was really important here. And we have more of those events planned right all the way through the startup of the water treatment plant. So that's a really cool thing. Another thing that some of you know that I do is I routinely meet with my staff and have what I call Coffee with Bryce meetings, which are there's no agenda. It's really just an open engagement. And I always invite in special guests to be with me to engage with my staff. Yesterday, Dr. Mark Edwards was our special guest. And that was phenomenal. It was a phenomenal exchange. I heard so many good comments from my staff afterwards. I haven't talked to you since, Mark, but saying how impressed they were with you. And hopefully you were impressed with them too. But we all have a shared goal here, obviously, to provide the best drinking water quality and public health protection that we can. And I think as we engage with each other, we will learn how to help each other achieve that common goal. So that was a really cool thing. So I just want this group to know we are actively working to implement those things we said we would do as a subcommittee in that regard in terms of culture change. I also want to inform this group that we are continuing to plan the Flint Water Infrastructure Summit. We've talked about that before, but that again is March 7 through 9 here in Flint. It's going to be at the riverfront. On that first day, Governor Snyder and Mayor Weaver are going to actually be part of the keynote address right after lunch, and so they're going to be co-hosting that event. Certainly there'll be a focus on Flint. General McDaniel, for example, is going to give an update on the Fast Start program during that conference or that summit. But also we're going to bring in some of the national experts in these issues too, such as people from Washington, D.C., and people from nearby cities who are struggling with the same issues, Detroit, et cetera. So put that on your calendar. Early January, I think it's going to be January 3rd. The link to register and the draft agenda will be out there, and I will send that to you all so you don't miss it, because we don't want you to miss it. It's going to be a really big, good event. So we want you to be aware of that. Also want you to be aware that on November 17, the EPA issued an amended order. This is, of course, subsequent to the original January emergency order, which the state and the city were co-respondents on that. And essentially what this order does is it puts some definitive timelines for which the city and the state need to respond to certain things to obviously provide safe drinking water in the long term. And so it's a good thing in that regard, and I'm pleased to report the city has done everything they need to do to meet all the deadlines to date, and so has the state. So we're moving along in that regard, and so I want you to be aware of that. It's on our Flint Water website, along with all the responses by the city and the DEQ to that amended order. So. And lastly, I don't know if Rich wants to talk about this, but we just talked about this as we were driving here, but the process for evaluating the latest sample results. Do you want to talk about it, or you want me to kick it off? Okay. So, as George shared, we have some really great news about our sample results, and so everybody, the press, everybody's calling us, so what does this mean? Well, we're not changing our message at this point, and here's the process. So on January 10th, the U.S. EPA is convening a data summit in Chicago for all of the regulatory agencies and the researchers like Dr. Edwards to bring their data to the table, if you will, to talk about it, talk about what it means. And then on January 12th, and correct me if I don't get this right, there's going to be like a town hall here in Flint to share some of that information along with information on the core teams and our outreach, correct? And then on January 18th in Lansing, the DEQ is convening what we're calling a panel of experts to process all of that information and to make a recommendation to this body, which meets on January 20th, which I'm sure will result in a recommendation to the governor on what our message should be going forward from that point. So that's kind of the process that we're going to use to evaluate and recommend what our message should be subsequent to our latest data. So, you want to add anything to that?
I'll just add, since you mentioned January 12th, and so Colonel Hippica is actually our project leader on the January 12th Town Hall Data Summit, and it'll be basically the ability to have full transparency around the EPA findings and the science findings in Chicago 2 days before, but also we'll have our core folks will be up to almost critical mass or closer to critical mass, and we'll want to provide updates and answer questions, and we'll have all the members of the team there. We don't have a venue yet, but as soon as we do, we will get something out to all of you, because we obviously would love to have everyone around this table and in this room present for that meeting as well.
Thanks. And that concludes my report, Mr. Hollins.
Mr. Jones.
So, yes. So, a couple questions. Wanted to find out if Dr. Pugh and I could be a part of the planning for the March 7th, 8th, and 9th event. That's my first question. My second question is, how soon do you expect the agenda for the March 7th through 9th event to be available? And I guess the third question is, I know one of the things that came out of the FWICC recommendations was a focus on environmental justice, and just want to hear a little bit about how that might be factored into the work of this event as well.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. So as you may be aware, Joyce McDay and General McDaniel have been part of the planning for this summit from the very beginning. But certainly we'd be happy to include you and Pamela if she wants to be involved going forward. The draft agenda will be available early January, probably January 3rd. And there is a particular segment of sessions proposed around community engagement, and some of those abstracts that have been submitted, I know, address environmental justice. So I know that is included. So
I think Dr. Pugh has a question as well.
Yes, I just wanted to mention, we talked maybe about.
Excuse me, could you come to the mic for, thank you.
We probably
actually talked about, I don't know, maybe about a month or so ago, about adding an environmental justice component or even tagging an environmental justice piece onto the infrastructure meeting, especially since this is something that's coming up from the task force that we're going to need to address. But, and the mayor and I have been talking about this, so we thought that this would be a good time, and I think I had mentioned that to you. So that's why I wanted to be a part of, had mentioned that I wanted to be a part of the planning process so that we don't get too far along where we can't do the two together.
Right. So let's talk afterwards, but I'd be happy to do that, so.
Dr. Sullivan?
There are concerns kind of bubbling up in the community based on comments in the press about the potential of taking lead service line replacement off the list of plans to attend to the Flint water crisis. Is in your view, is that potentially something that's going to be removed from the table? Is there potential on January 10th for there to be a recommendation that lead service lines don't need to be replaced?
I don't anticipate that. The reality is, of course, the city has made this a priority, and through the distribution optimization work that the city has a contract, Arcade is doing that work. They're doing a prioritized list of distribution improvements, and I do not anticipate that that would be part of the.
Okay, I just wanted on the record that the residents are concerned about that, and that would not be a positive outcome.
No.
Mr. Barrett?
I'd just like to add the letter that I referenced earlier that Mayor Weaver is sending out under the Flint Cares Coalition deals with that and assures all residents that nothing is changing, even though the system's getting better, that we pledge to get the lead out, and we're going to continue to get the lead out.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Bryce? Thank you, Bryce.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Beecher, we're fortunate to have her. She is a national expert on water rates, and she's going to be working closely with Eric Rothstein for the rate subcommittee. So, Dr. Beecher.
You're just being nice to me because you volunteered me for this.
Yes, I owe you lunch too.
You are a tough man to say no to, and I compliment you for that. Well, anyhow, thank you for this honor. I'm very pleased to be a resource on this issue, something I'm passionate about. I've really devoted my entire career to. So we had our first call. I think it was really productive. I think we're off to a good start. We, basically have just, done introductions. And then since then, I've started to build a resource page. Actually, it's in a Google Docs. And this will be a very transparent and inclusive process. So anybody who's, even though we have a subcommittee, if anybody's interested in taking a look, there's nothing proprietary in there. It's just resources that, I think are going to be helpful to us. And I would invite all of you not only to contact me about that, but to also recommend resources. I already picked up one today, so I'm pleased about that. So, of course, this issue of water affordability is not, sadly, not unique to Flint, not unique to Michigan, not unique to the United States. It's a global issue, especially as we enter into an infrastructure replacement cycle where some of that infrastructure was supported through other resources in the past. That said, water infrastructure, as you've talked about, is sort of an inflection point. We have opportunities now to, I think to really re-optimize and build an infrastructure that's going to be sustainable going forward. I was also very pleased to participate in the Governor's Infrastructure Commission. The 21st Century Infrastructure Report is out now, and I think that actually dovetails really nicely with the work that now needs to be done on how we're going to support the cost of infrastructure going forward and how we do that in a fair and equitable way and in a way that, again, supports the fundamental goal of healthy people, healthy communities, healthy families. So I think that's something we need to talk about. I mean, I work in utility rate making. Of course, every utility thinks they're the most important, but we do know water is the one utility product that we physically ingest, and it has this special, critical connection to public health. And so I think when we think about rate making, we have to balance the issues of equity and efficiency and do that really thoughtfully and consciously. And so I think those are the types of things we'll talk about. So we're building resources. A couple of issues were identified already that I think are really important. One is to look, of course, to what others have done. What will be especially helpful there is Eric Rothstein is an old friend of mine, I can say that, and he led the effort in Detroit on the Detroit Blue Ribbon Panel on Water Affordability, and that provides a wonderful resource, and we can build on that dialogue and in many ways the model, the process that they used there. I think it was very constructive and very helpful. And Eric actually, in his comments on our first call, I think helped frame things up nicely, that we need to talk about Flint as a special case in terms of water rates. We need to talk about the existing legal framework here in Michigan, which does provide some challenges that we need to talk about. There's only so much you can do within the existing legal framework. So then beyond that, we can also talk about possibly, discussing recommendations for reforms or revisiting that framework and what can be done, going forward, and things that that the governor and the legislature might want to consider at some point. So let's see. So we're going to look at what others have done. We're going to look at the issue of customer engagement that was mentioned right up front. I think in the rate making world, that's recognized as a critical issue. There's 50,000 water systems in this country, and there's practically 50,000 different approaches to rate design, and that partly reflects community values. And the only way you do that is by getting out and talking to people, and in part, finding out what their priorities are and engaging them in the process. I mean, customers need to feel empowered about rates just as they do about the quality of their water. So I think that's really important. So, and then I was glad to hear the mayor talk about capacity development. I think one of the goals here is to also link rate making back to community finance issues and to capacity development in this area, because when the EPA talks about capacity, they talk about technical, managerial, and financial capacity and how these are so closely related. So this is something that we can certainly, I think, do our best to try to bring some ideas to the table for that. So I don't think we'll solve everything, but I think we certainly intend to have some constructive dialogue and hopefully contribute some ideas to your efforts.
Thanks, Dr. Beecher. Any questions? Mayor?
I just have a comment, and I know you were saying that Flint is unique, and I hope you were talking about, and keep in mind that before we had this particular water issue, we had a water issue, and it was as far as the rates, because in Flint we were paying more than any place else, and that was our water challenge prior to any other kinds of contamination in the water. So just keep that in mind, that people were already angry and outraged about what we were paying for water then. So
absolutely, and thank you for reminding us of that, because that is something I've studied, and it's something I've compared my own water bill to what people are paying in Flint, and so I've actually used that in talks that I give on this. It's a very important point. Thank you.
Dr. Edwards.
Yeah, I'd also just like to reiterate that as we near the end of the public health crisis phase here, and after we take care of the lead pipes, that the water rate issue is really a nexus of public health. So I don't want that to get lost. It's not just, if we don't get normal demand in the Flint system for the foreseeable future, the water quality will suffer as well. So getting the rates to normal levels, getting demand to normal levels is important to the quality of the water coming out of the tap, also the public hygiene dimensions of this crisis.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? And again, if you want to participate on this subcommittee, just let me know and we'll just add you. So I appreciate you for doing this, Dr. Beecher. So next we have Mike Zimmer.
Thank you. Following the last FWIC, the existing FWIC Policy Subcommittee was assigned the task of reviewing and analyzing the rental property water bill issue that had been raised at the meeting. For this task, we expanded the membership of the committee just a bit. It now is made up of Steve Branch, Jim Koski, Larry